Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of Crossing Swords. As always, I'm Andrew.
And I'm appalled that we even need to be having this discussion.
I'm appalled, you're appalled.
We're all appalled.
We're all appalled.
Who isn't appalled?
Everyone's appalled.
Tasha's not appalled.
It doesn't matter what side of this discussion you come down on, you're most likely appalled.
You're either appalled it happened or appalled you got caught. Like
Yeah.
one very specific person is appalled they got caught.
Yeah.
And everyone else is appalled it happened.
Allegedly caught.
Seems pretty nailed on.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
I will get into why.
We can get into one.
We'll get into why. We'll get into one.
We'll get into
But
it.
you have to get my permission first.
Well, much like the person we're going to talk about, allegedly I don't like doing that.
Yes. You just like it to be...
I mean, I was hoping for the intro to be quite a solemn, serious, respectful intro. And,
which we're famed for.
Which we are
famed for.
We're very good at it. We nail it first time, every time. There's never any technical issues or
We are like the
slip-ups.
podcasting equivalent of Sex Panther. 60% of the time, we work every time.
What's the Sex Panther?
In Anchorman, it's the aftershave
I
that
don't like
Paul Rudd's
Anchorman.
character wears. It's like 60% of the time,
It works.
it works every time. And then and it cuts straight to Will Ferrell's like, well, that makes absolutely no sense.
No,
But it does make sense. Because 60% of the time,
it works.
it works every time. It works every time. 60% of the time.
60%, yeah. I mean, you can't argue with that sort of maths.
Higher success rate than I've got.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm just saying that to be humble and to appear humble
do
on
they
the
sell
pod.
this aftershave for the men out there?
I mean, not in like a legal capacity.
No, but do you make it?
You
then?
can get it, yeah.
Okay.
I've got a couple of the butlers working a couple of bathtubs.
I can believe it. Along with the meth.
I mean, just what a production line.
I could see you doing a Breaking Bad.
What, doing drugs?
Yeah.
I think I'd be... See, the thing is, I would genuinely be interested to see if I could make a pure, sort of artificial
I just
drug,
reckon like at some point
like a cocaine or a
you read
meth.
some sort of chemistry book that no one else has read, and it just happened to have the chemical formula for meth, which for some reason you've remembered to memory.
I mean, I would be fascinated to see if I could just... But I wouldn't go full break, but I wouldn't be selling it. I just want to know if I could make it.
You just want to make it.
Just want to make
I
it.
don't believe that for a second. You may not directly sell it yourself, but the butlers will be.
Yeah, well, they've got to make a living. I'm not paying them enough.
But you're not going
That's
to
for
give them
damn
any
sure.
of that money, are you?
No, but if they just take it and sell it on the side, I'll turn the other way.
Okay. That's very generous, actually. They're going to make a good living.
Yeah, well, if they make too good a living, then I'll turn back the right way.
You start taking the money again.
Start taking a kick up.
Yeah.
Get a glove.
Before we start talking about this, we're going to be talking about, and we've never done this before.
Are you doing a trigger warning?
Yeah, I was going to, yeah.
Smart man.
I've
I've always said you're smart, didn't I? I've always
on
said.
occasion you've said it.
I
Not very
know
often.
60% of the time, I've always said.
I'm an intelligent
You're
man.
an intelligent
I don't think
man.
it's as high as 60%. I'll take it. I'll take the 60%. We're going to be talking about quite serious and sensitive subjects. And if anyone has had any experience of what we're going to talk about,
Which,
this might not be
historically
the
speaking,
podcast for you
Most
today.
women have,
Yeah. So if it's something that
statistically speaking.
you struggle with or have issues with, or it's just triggering for you in general, it's probably not the best episode for you, but there's your trigger warning.
And if you're Russell Brand, you probably shouldn't listen either.
No,
I don't think this is going to be very favourable for you.
No, to be honest with you, we haven't talked about this off air at all, really.
Not
Only
really,
that
no.
we know it's happened, but we've not talked about how we
Look at
feel
the size
about
of
it.
that. Like, no, it's not a dragonfly, is it? It's like a...
No, that's a daddy long legs.
Is that a daddy long legs?
Yeah.
Shit at the bed. Look at the size of it. I'm sorry, that's so not even part of it.
For a
It
second,
was just in the corner of my eye. It's
if that had been a giant spider, we would have had to have
Stopped
stopped
and
the
re-recorded.
recording. Would have had to have.
Where do you draw the line? This is nothing to do with like sexual assault with Russell Brand. Where do you draw the line between spider and daddy long legs? Like, what's the differential?
A spider doesn't have wings. I mean, yeah, a spider
Well,
doesn't
daddy
have
long
wings.
legs don't have wings.
Yeah, they do. The mosquito long-legged thing.
Yeah, it's more like a mosquito than daddy long
Yeah,
legs.
same.
No, daddy long legs is just a spider with long legs.
No, daddy long legs is one that's they're very skinny, aren't they?
Yeah, but they don't have legs. They don't have wings. They do have legs.
I thought they did have wings.
I think they have wings.
To be honest with you, I don't know if you're the reliable narrator.
We'll go for this, are we?
We don't have to. I thoroughly enjoyed it, though. Are you doing it?
I'm Googling it.
You're Googling it. So basically, me and Jake have disagreed in the past over what vaccines are and aren't meant to do. Jake was under the impression no vaccine gives immunity.
Crane flies have wings, but that's not what I consider a dragon.
You were talking about vaccines.
That's not what I would consider a daddy long legs.
No, fair enough.
You keep going. Cellar spiders, that's a daddy long legs.
And a friend of ours who listens to the pod and has also been on the pod, Mr. Andrew, started a group chat because he messaged me privately and he was like, Big, did I just hear on the pod that Jake doesn't think vaccines give immunity? I was like, yeah, you
Not
did.
in the sense that... Oh, look, we're not going to get into this again. It's the semantics of...
He started a group chat and just started taking Jake to task on it, and I just sort of chirped in every now and again.
What it
but
is
I just
is
let little...
And I'm well aware of this flaw in my character. I'm very easy to rile.
Yeah, and I bet you just didn't want to admit you were wrong or concede the point.
The temptation, because we played like a little friendly five-a-side game yet last night.
Okay.
The temptation to 2-foot the son of a bitch was so high.
Was he smug when you turned up?
He gave me a little wave. He gave me a little smug wave.
Yeah.
He did, yeah.
Because I know what he can be like. I can imagine him just giving you a look of like...
Look, I get it. I'm easy to rile.
Yeah.
I know that.
But no, I did enjoy that group chat.
Yeah, well, I'm glad someone did. 2/3 of it, I think, found it quite enjoyable.
Yeah. So I think before we get into the meat of it, I thought maybe if we put our cards on the table at the beginning and sort of maybe say how we felt about Russell Brand prior to what's happened.
Sure.
And perhaps how you feel now.
Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first? Is that your cue?
I'm easy.
So when he first burst onto the scene, and you've got to... Oh, this sounds like such an excuse already, but you've got to remember the age that I was at the time as well, because I think it is quite relevant. So when he first burst onto the scene, it was kind of like 2006, 2007, maybe a bit before that. But when he started doing Big Brother's Big Mouth or Little Sister or whatever the show was called, it was about 2007.
I think it was called Big Brother's Little Brother and then Big Brother's Big Mouth. Yeah,
there's like a few iterations of it, but whatever. So when that was about 2006, 2007. So I was about 14, 15, 16, that sort of age when he was kind of coming on and just coming into the limelight and doing a bit of stand-up and doing a bit of telly work. And I quite enjoyed him. I thought he was a kind of... Yeah, he was a bit...
He was outrageous,
he was energy.
Flirty.
He was obviously...
quite charismatic.
Looking back, flirty might be a bit not the right word, but definitely it was kind of like...
No, but that's how
he pushed the
perceived,
boundaries,
wasn't it?
He came in and he pushed the boundaries, and he talked quite openly at the time about things like sucking dick for drugs, all that kind of stuff that you kind of just those are the kind of things that get leaked to papers and scandalised.
Brutally honest, isn't it?
For you to be the one leading the story and just come out and go, yeah, I did it, nothing to be ashamed of. I was in a, whatever. So I quite liked him. And then when he did, I think, was it the Trues he did first? I was kind of like, it's not for me, but I don't ever begrudge anyone going political because at the end of the day, as we said before, we're all in it. Politics affects all of us directly and indirectly. So we're all entitled. And I would say
we've done it to a degree because we never set out to be a particularly political podcast.
We just happen to be a political. We just happen to be a podcast during some of the roughest political times.
Exactly.
Where every week there was something that warranted discussion.
Yeah.
But when he did that, I was kind of like, it wasn't really for me, but like I said, I don't begrudge anyone going political. Yeah. And then when he went that next step and started doing the guru
more
spiritual
side of things,
and also the kind of
conspiracy side of things,
I was like, genuinely, and I'm not saying this respectively, I think
that's
we've
just
spoken...
not your thing.
I think we'd spoken...
Two things that I would never think you'd be into is one, spirituality.
No, I don't mind a bit of spirituality.
No, but the only person I've ever heard you be respectful in regards to it for is myself. Other than that, you're quite dismissive about it.
What I say to you off air. No, but when he kind of did like the conspiratorial stuff, the guru stuff, I kind of was like, okay, he's just turned a new leaf.
Yeah.
The spiritual stuff was like maybe just turned. But when he started doing, he kind of paired it with the conspiracy stuff. Kind of came not long after each other.
Yeah, I would say
They
the
didn't come at the
spiritual
same
side was
side.
first, and then
But it
he
weren't long
phased in
after
the
that he started
conspiracy
coming in.
stuff, yeah.
And then my opinion, and I think we discussed it before all this came out. You know, going back a few years,
Yeah.
I was like, for me now, he's just a crackpot. He's gone too far, and he's a fucking loon trying to binge off some absolute mental side of society that will just believe everything you say as long as you start by telling them, I'm not the mainstream, and then they'll eat it all up, and it's like, what the fuck? What?
Yeah.
But that's my kind of journey of Russell Brand. Obviously, we're talking. You're presumably saying, how did you feel right up to the allegations coming to light? So right before that. Just as they were coming out, I was in the mind that he was just a loony crackpot conspiracist.
Yeah.
What about your journey?
Pause it there. Yeah. So
Pause it there.
Well, a bit like you, I was first aware of him when he was on Big Brother and stuff. My sister was a big avid watcher of it. My mum enjoyed it. But to be honest with you, back then I found him too much. Like, I thought he was funny, but I wouldn't have crossed the road to watch something he was on.
Have you read either of his books?
No, I haven't.
But you're not a massive reader though, are you?
No.
So maybe that's not a fair...
No, I have to really be in the mood to read something. And to be honest with you, I think, like, my sister had read my bookie work, and I was going to read it, but at the time she was like, to be honest with you, the vocabulary's quite
out there,
and I think you might find it difficult to follow it, which is...
I know where she's coming from.
No, 100%. And
but
to be honest with
100% just like...
well, it sounds like a slam, but I think she was just being honest. You're not probably...
You won't enjoy it because you're just going to be spending the time Googling
asking
words.
what these words mean, yeah. And I was like, no, fair enough, so I didn't read it. I got more into him when he did the Trues, because at that point I started to become politically engaged, because it started with... He started around the time the Tories got in power, more or less, not long afterwards, maybe.
Well, it sort of started after he did that interview with Ed Miliband, wasn't it?
No, it had been around at least, I would say, a year.
Because that was 2010.
Because when he first started doing the Trues, it was all, don't vote, it's pointless, and all of that. And to be honest with you, I didn't always agree with what he was saying. I just enjoyed the content he was making. And I think at the time, I was probably a bit more left than I am now. And so it just appealed what he was talking about. He also did a lot of stuff like, I can't remember what the tower block was called, but there was a tower block with a lot of single mums in, and it was owned by...
Sorry, how come you've never mentioned this to me before? There's this place exists with my key, the kind of women that historically...
Love you.
Love me.
They were a bit younger than your normal demographic.
Are we talking like teen mum?
20s, 30s.
I don't think they'd enjoy me. I don't think they've matured enough to appreciate what I am.
40s,
At that point, they've started to come around to realising the qualities of a man.
Offer. Yeah, absolutely. And some lord was going to own the tower block, and he was basically going to have them turfed out because he wanted to knock it down and build something better. And no one was paying any attention. They were going to get turfed out, and then they reached out to Russell. He then got them to Downing Street. They got a lot of attention, and they ended up getting to keep their home. So, like, he was doing good stuff at the time, and I just enjoyed the content. And then he sort of disappeared for a bit, which came along with, under the Cameron government, there was a day where we were meant to get a report released that had been done years before about the molestation going on in Parliament and the abuse MPs were doing to children. And David Cameron kicked it like 75 years down the road. And he did a video where he basically said, stop fucking our kids and
I remember,
tell
I
us
vaguely
what's going
remember
on.
it.
And then he just vanished after that. He didn't do anything for about a year, and then he came back doing the spiritual stuff. And to be honest with you, I started to go off of him a bit then. And I've enjoyed some of his content that he's done, I guess the conspiracy stuff, because some of it I sort of agree with, but not all of it. But I wouldn't have said I was as much of a fan of his now as I was back during the sort of Trues times. That's where I was at with him.
What I said is it's so funny that obviously we both dropped off towards the end of being a fan of him.
Yeah.
But that we kind of went in opposite directions almost. Like I started out liking him, you started out disliking him. And then at the moment where I kind of started going off him, you started going on to him.
Yeah.
And it was just a lovely little...
Yeah, well, I think out of the two of us, I would say I'm more open to alternative news sources.
I think that's fair.
I don't believe all of it. I find some of it interesting. And even you defended him on, because remember he was getting criticised about the video he did about conspiracies and the laser hitting the island and starting the wildfires in America. Do you remember? And
Vaguely.
and everyone was saying in the video that he said that it was a laser that started the fires, and that wasn't what he said. So even you were like, well, no, I may not agree with most of what he says, but that's not
I
the
vaguely
message he was
recall
giving.
it. I think I watched the video and it was just, and yeah, I've got this vague recollection of the comments being like, oh, he's fucking lost it. He's saying this, and I'm like, he has lost it, and I'm with you.
But that's not what he
But
says
he didn't.
there.
He didn't actually say that.
No.
You've added that,
Yeah.
and then you've tried to criticise him for it.
So yeah, that's where I was at with him going into what's happened. I'll start with how I feel now, because
Sure.
I have a feeling I know. I feel really conflicted, to be honest. I've read the article, I've watched the documentary, which, to be honest, they're a cut and paste version of one another. Basically, the documentary is sort of a longer form version of the.
Which I've read the article.
Yeah, and I've
and
since
you've
read the
seen
article, and to be honest with you, there's
It's just the same.
basically no difference between the two. And like, it's not good, the accusations. Like
What elements are conflicting for you?
I think, one, there's not enough physical evidence. Like, for example, with the Mason Greenwood situation, we had audio, we had images, we had substance we could look at to make us go, all right, dead set, this is what he did. We haven't got that in this situation. But at the same time, his behaviour over the years, which has been really reprehensible at times, and we can go into it, whether it's the Jimmy Savile interview, which I had no idea about until the last couple of days.
Oh, when he offered to bring his assistant and make her get naked.
I forgot about the Andrew Sachs thing.
Yeah, I never forgot about that. That was always there.
And to be honest with you, the reason I went off of him a little while ago was because I watch a podcast called Have a Word, and they had Daniel Sloss on.
No, I was going to mention Daniel Sloss, yeah.
They had him on twice in the last couple of years, and I think the furthest one back, so maybe 2 years ago, he was telling them a story about his book, because he's written a book called Everyone You Hate Will Die, and it's a reason to celebrate. And it's based off the idea he has bottles of, and I've mentioned it on the pod before, and when we did, it's on the Schofield episode, so if you'd like to go back and listen to that, please do.
Good plug.
I mentioned the story that he has champagne bottles that he writes someone's name on, and when they die or something really bad happens to them, they have a celebrate. And they asked him, give us an example of someone you've put on a bottle. And he went, Russell Brand, and everyone went silent. And one of them then pipes up and goes, what for? And Daniel Sloss goes, for reasons I can say on air or reasons I can't. And one of them goes to say something, and one of them just yells super injunction, and then they have to move on from it. And that, like, I was like, they never get serious about anything on this podcast. So
unless they're about to be sued.
And they got so nervous in that moment. I was like, oh, fuck. Like, that doesn't sound good.
Have you seen the thing that the little speech, impassioned speech that he does at the end of one of his specials, Daniel Sloss? I'm assuming you have.
Yeah, is it X?
Yeah, but you know the thing where he's talking about his experience with his friend?
Yes.
Yeah, so for the people who don't, I'll tell you the speech. Obviously, it's not verbatim, and obviously, I am not going to be. There is a real rawness and emotion in his voice as he's telling this. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to, and I'm not even going to try. I'm not going to try and replicate that. But he says, you know, that there are monsters among us, and they look like us. They look like you and me. He said, because I used to think, like a lot of guys, that if I wasn't part of the problem, therefore I must be part of the solution, because I'll stand up every now and then and I'll say, you know, rapists are bad and sex pests are bad and whatever and this and that and the other. And he says, but what happened was, he says, you know, I didn't do anything. And then my friend raped another friend.
Yeah.
And he says, and if I'm honest with myself, really honest with myself, when I look back, were there signs in my friend's behaviour towards women that were questionable, worrying, indicative of this the things that he might have been capable of? And if I'm completely honest with myself, yes, there were. And I did nothing. I didn't challenge any of them. And he says, and that will stay with me for the rest of my life until I die. That will be the guilt that I bear.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful thing. And he is
It's a very good special.
only person. I'm a big fan of Daniel Sloss. I think he's very funny as
I
well.
really like Daniel Sloss.
He's the only person
And
to
I
have gone
commend
on
him
record.
for going on the documentary as well.
He's the only person to have gone on record and
Yeah.
with his name and said, yeah, this is me. And you can't help but feel like that
And
experience
he's
that
done
he
it
talks
several
about.
times over the years. There's clips that have emerged of him on podcasts making comments about Russell
You
Brand.
can't help but feel like those experiences with his own friend
Yeah.
are what led to him being, I don't care, sue me.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna live with that guilt again for someone else.
Yeah.
And Catherine Ryan quite famously called out the behaviour.
When that happened, I instantly remembered that podcast episode, and I was like, "Fuck!" And then I was like, "They have worked together, Russell and Catherine." So in my head straight away, I was putting two and two together.
Well, there's a very interesting. I think it might have even been Adam Rowe that said it. I don't quote me on that, but he was saying that it's an industry rumor, but one of those open secrets. And this is a phrase that's come up a lot in the last week or so. Open secrets. That if you go back to that series of Comedy Central roast battle,
yeah,
they didn't air it over once a week.
like you would any
They
other TV
aired it
series.
all in a week. And part of the rumour, the open secret, was that these allegations against Russell Brand that are now coming to light were about to come to light.
I think it was Vice, he said it was, wasn't it?
And
They were doing a documentary.
And as you just mentioned, he got a super injunction that blocked it at the last minute. But the producers were like, if this comes out while we're airing, the show gets cancelled. We do not get another chance. Let's get them all out in a week. Let's get them all out. Let's make sure we get our ratings, and then we can
move on to
the next series and forget about this guy. And yeah, Catherine Ryan's publicly called him out at a number of her shows, but she's never mentioned him by name, and she always says, because legally,
he's very litigious.
I can't. But the legality of it is something I wanted to discuss with you that I think throws a lot of weight behind these allegations, because these journalists know full well the litigious process. They know full well the power that these people have if you step up and you make an incorrect claim.
Yeah.
That not only is your career ruined, you're financially bankrupt. It fucks you up if you step up to the plate and you get it wrong. If you take a swing and you miss, it fucks you up.
Yes.
Which is why, and bear in mind, we already know that Russell's had a super injunction before.
We do.
So we know that he's capable of
absolutely
taking whatever legal action he needs to take.
Known thing that Russell Brand's not afraid to contact his lawyers.
But again, I don't know the ins and outs. Look, this has not come as a shock, and I'm not trying to stand here and preach and be like, well, I know this and I know that. I don't know the ins and outs of what a super injunction is, and someone can write in and tell me I'm wrong. Please do. But there is, in my opinion, not in my opinion, as far as I'm aware, a very clear difference between counter-suing someone for libel and blocking what they're going to say, the super injunction to say, you can't say that. There's a big difference between saying, you can't say that, and saying, I'm going to sue you for, even writing the thing about me, even if it never got out.
I'm assuming both are backed up by the same thing, which is being able to argue they perhaps don't have enough evidence to run with whatever they're going to say.
But, well, this is the thing. They've obviously done their research.
Yeah.
They've obviously compounded it, and they will have made this article and this dispatches airtight.
I hope that's the case, because, to be honest with you, when I watched the documentary, at the end, there wasn't really any, smoking guns, if you know what I mean. Like they weren't, like they were saying, this has been corroborated by multiple witnesses, or we've seen texts or we've seen emails, but we weren't shown any of it. Now, so I would hope with them.
I imagine that's the legality of it. That's the.
Perhaps you could be right. But what I mean is, having watched that documentary, I wasn't shown anything that made me go, all right, that means he's.
My first guess is, for example, a text message or a text chain. If you show it to someone in private, that's your prerogative. You can do whatever you want with your end of the message. But if, for example, you and I have a text chain going and then it airs on telly, true or not, no matter how incriminating it is that whatever you've said, I would imagine you're in a position where you can sue me for sharing something that was a private
Speaking
thing.
of the text for a second, have you heard about the fact that the one that they show on the documentary and in the article has been edited?
I'm not aware of them. I didn't see any images from the...
Yeah, I've actually got it on my phone because I wanted to show you, because it's quite clearly like there's something off about it, and I went and checked it because I managed to get a free version of the article so I could read it. And I even checked multiple sources to make sure I was seeing the right image, because just in case anyone was showing the wrong one. And like, it's slightly out of a line. There's different colours. And the actual text itself, they show it in the documentary as some of the evidence they're presenting that he'd raped this girl. But in the message, if you read it, there's not one mention of rape, only that he didn't wear a condom. So I thought that was slightly misleading in the documentary, because that's not how they presented it in the documentary.
No, and that's fair. But again, I imagine a lot of that is part of...
Well, like, look, what my hope would be that if they were willing to risk potentially, because they potentially could ruin his life of exposing this if it's not true, that they've got enough evidence backed up that will be given to the relevant authorities otherwise.
Obviously, sexual assault is largely hearsay anyway.
Well, that's
not
the
always,
problem.
but a lot of it is. But I would imagine that if it was all hearsay, Brand would have already been moving to countersue,
Maybe.
to sue for litigation.
Maybe.
And he hasn't. He's not.
I think
even in his
is
apology video.
we're still so early into this. Like, the police are only just looking into it now, so we're months,
The
maybe
thing
a
is,
year away from anything developing.
I'm
let
not being
alone going
funny.
to court or...
Well, this argument, and I think it is something we should talk about, because a lot of people say, why are they only coming forward now? Why are they not coming forward then? There's a
Yeah.
number of things. Number one, the first thing I would say is, and I know people, this is about as nuanced as it gets, so we'll get into the more clear-cut stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't necessarily know they've been raped because it was so coercive,
Yeah.
rather than someone jumping you and pinning you down and having sex. Because a lot of the times it's in relationships or whatever, and it's
You might have
coerced
been
sex.
manipulated.
They don't
or-
know that they've been raped until a little bit later down the line,
Mm.
when they realise, actually, do you know what I was? And also, a lot of times, there's so much shame and guilt around
Yeah.
it, and these victims blame themselves. Never mind, you don't need to blame them; they blame themselves, and they're like, "Oh my God, how did I let it happen? What did I get myself into? What did I
Yeah.
do?" And it's only when someone else comes forward that they're like, "No, you know what? Yeah, that person raped me. That person assaulted me." Then I think there's also the thing that, with all due respect, why would you take, like, the police, who...
No, I've got to admit, I've listened to a lot of arguments as to why. And to be honest with you, I don't subscribe to the opinion these women should have come forward earlier. And I don't think they technically came forward now. Like, I think the Times and Channel 4 approached, or like looked into it, investigated, found these women, and
Well, one of them,
their...
as you know from the dispatches, one of them went to a rape crisis centre
Yes.
the very next day.
Yeah.
And
That's the only bit of evidence like that could be potentially rock solid, because they said there's been a sample stored. So I would like to think they're going to investigate that further and look into it. And before we go forward, despite the fact I feel conflicted, just for the record, for anyone that might be listening, and I feel like I've been consistent on it with people like Mason Greenwood, if Russell was guilty of what he's been accused of, then the guy's a scumbag and should be punished for it. So just want to get that.
I don't think there's any doubt in my mind. Like I said, if he's not
That's
making moves to sue,
well, we don't know what he's doing.
we'd know.
Potentially.
We'd know. And in his interview, you know, in his interview,
It's
his
only been
defence
what? It
video,
came out on Sunday, and at the time I
Yeah.
recorded, it's been 4 days. So
he'd have known this was coming.
I think he was informed, 2 days before?
Yeah.
Yeah. But they might just be getting their ducks in a row. We don't...
He'd have known this was coming from years ago.
Potentially.
But just going back to the reason why I think there are a number of podcast interviews,
Yeah.
radio interviews, TV interviews, articles, books. There's a whole litany of media out there, and I urge you to go and read some, listen to some, watch some, of women talking about times that they have reported sexual assault. And I remember one that really stuck with me, and it seems subtle and it seems like nothing. But she went in the day after the attack. She'd gone in and she'd reported it. And the police officer taking her statement had said, no, it must have been the day. Oh, no, it was the day. Let me start again, because it is quite key to this the story. So she'd been raped on a night out. So the following, overnight, she met up with some friends to kind of like fucking get her head together and whatever. And the following day, she'd gone, before she went home and did anything, because she wanted to go home and kind of like clean herself up. And her friends sort of went, no, because if they need to take any samples or anything, this all needs to be there. So she took herself to the police station. And one of the police officer taking her statement said, like, oh, is that what you were wearing? Yeah, I'm not surprised, kind of thing. And it seems like a really little offhand comment.
It's not, though.
But this is the attitude
That's a disgusting thing
This
to say.
is the attitude. And look, she launched a complaint and the officer was successfully dealt with. But again, like I said, there's a whole litany of media out there. Hers is not an isolated incident.
No, I was listening to a journalist called Ava Santina talk about it, where she was like, it is a humiliating thing for a woman to have to go through.
Because they're made to feel like...
Yeah, and then at the end of it, we have a 1% conviction rate on sexual assault.
And I read an interesting article published by a group of psychologists about this. They are... I've got a feeling they were based in... God, what's the one in Colombia, in America? But don't quote me on that. But they did an interesting thing. So they did a collected study, and they found that juries, obviously this is an American study on American jury and the American system, but juries, apparently a lot of the time that they fail to reach a verdict on rape cases that they sit in on, and it's not that they decide the bloke's innocent or that they should be acquitted or found not guilty. Normally what happens is they reach a kind of stalemate with it, and obviously the thing is either it goes to retrial or they just get found not guilty. They feel bad about potentially ruining a man's life.
Yeah, I think I've read
based on a false accusation. But it's like, do you know what I mean? I mean,
for me, it should be based off of evidence. I think that, but equally, what I would say is, I don't think 99% of accusers are lying.
I think that the bulk of studies, and there are a number of studies on this, and they all have pretty much the same numbers. It's something like 0.5% of sexual assaults are falsely accused sexual assaults, and therefore mean that 99.5% of sexual assaults that are believed to take place have taken place.
I think the issue of conviction will be a multitude of things. I think it'll be institutional issues like misogyny, those sort of things. I think it will be a lack of evidence. I think it will be a multitude of different but it's not good enough at the same time.
But with Brand,
now
I don't think I did ask you this, but I think I wanted to ask you this at the time.
Yeah.
Because it's a theory, and I've no doubt you'd have heard the theory and you'll have formed your own opinions on it. Do you think that he started going down the anti-mainstream media route, knowing that these things were bubbling under the surface, going way back to the super injunction that he took out? Do you think he started going down that route, knowing that one day the super injunction would either be overturned or it would reach its statute or new evidence would come to light? And therefore, he was in a position to say that it was a witch hunt on me for these other things that I've been saying. They're trying to get rid of me for these other things.
Yeah.
Because I do. I think it's got some real credibility.
I think it's possible.
Especially when you look at the timing of when his kind of quote-unquote mainstream career ended.
Yeah.
And it pretty much ended overnight. Now, at the time, personally, I just dismissed that as thinking show business is fickle.
Yeah.
Some focus groups obviously decided he's no longer the it thing. And, channels have dropped him like he's a hot bag of flaming shit. That's what they do.
I don't think he was drugged though. I think he walked away from everything.
But no, I don't think he was. I think now, looking back at it, I think
Well, again, there's no real way for us to know.
Because we know that TV companies and film studios are happy to work with sexual abusers.
I've been talking about
But what they don't like is working with people who are publicly known sexual abusers.
Which the thing is though, because it's this open secret, you can't quite. I mean, it's widely known and like people have heard about it, but no, like I don't know. Like, to be honest with you, I lean towards believing he's guilty for multiple reasons. One, I respect the people that have backed up a lot of the accusations that they've heard, these stories that they've heard his back and what he's done. And then on top of that, like, whether he's actually guilty or not, his behaviour over the years makes it very easy to believe it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, his own conduct, his own behaviour, the things he said, the things he's done, the Savile thing, the Sacks, the way he has treated women over the years, because, like, I would definitely put it, like, there's no way you're sleeping with 80 women a month and not mistreating some of those women in one way or another.
Don't know. I think you should quickly clarify the Savile thing and the Sacks thing.
So the Savile thing, and I did, like I said, I didn't know about this until the last couple of days, because I never listened to his radio show. I was just not really into radio at that point.
He was an old man radio as well, with all due respect.
BBC Radio 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's not old man, but it's young people don't. You know,
young people don't really listen to BBC, do they?
If they do, it's BBC Radio 1. That's
okay, fair enough. But
you traditionally, you start with Radio 1 when you're young and you're hip and you're happening. Then you move to Radio 2 when you're a little bit older and you realise, hey, do you know what's happening? Christ knows what's happening on Radio 3. We don't touch that. We don't talk about that. Radio 4 when you've got a tweed jacket with little patches on the elbows.
And then you're on Classic.
And then once you smoke some crack, Radio 5 for a bit of sport and a bit of discussion. If you want to phone in and get angry at the world, you know.
Find the sort of Alan Brazils of this world.
There's too many Willies in books these days. You know, that's when you're Radio 5s. And then your Radio 6 is when you've smoked some crack and you want to listen to just absolutely random music. You decide, like, I wonder if we could go from, like, new age jazz to drum and bass and then into, like, a kind of funkadelic soul thing. That's what's happening on Radio 6.
Okay.
But anyway.
So Russell had a radio show on BBC Radio 2.
Yes.
And he was having an interview over the phone with Jimmy Savile,
who at the time, whilst it was an open secret, again, apparently,
wasn't an outed paedophile.
It wasn't public knowledge.
Or sexual abuser. But with the level of exposure Brand had at the time, it wouldn't be difficult to believe that he wouldn't have had full knowledge of the rumours around Jimmy Savile.
Possibly, yeah.
And I actually think it's the reason why he says what he says in the interview. Because he asks to meet, he says, like, I'd love to meet you at some point.
I don't meet single men.
And he's like, I don't meet up with men. If you have a sister, that would be all right. He said, well, I don't have a sister. And he's like, well, I don't really meet up with boys. And he was like, well, I do have an attractive assistant called, and he names her on air.
Yeah.
And then proceeds to not only offer her services to massage.
And she's in, I don't know if she's in the dispatches, but she features in the article.
Yeah. And he then proceeds to offer her naked to Sir Jimmy.
Saying she's got to do whatever I want. That's part of her job.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you look back on it, how did we not know? Do you know what I mean? About Brand and about Savile.
Yeah.
When it's all tongue in cheek or whatever, you know, I presume that's how we took it at the time. But how do you know when someone goes and goes, I don't meet single blokes? Okay.
Well, like, look,
you know,
if Brand's guilty of what he's been accused of, he basically replicated what Jimmy Savile did in terms of his behaviour. He just did whatever he wanted on camera.
And in terms
People just found it
and
endearing.
in terms of doing nice charitable things, presumably to ease his own.
Potentially, yeah.
I think for Russell, and obviously I'm making a character judgment. Yeah. I've never met him, but it feels like just to kind of ease his own guilt, to be like, no, I am a good bloke. I am all right. I make some mistakes. And it's like, bro, there's mistakes. Like, for example, I would say in the context of abuse and treatment of women and stuff, I would say a mistake is, you know, accidentally shouting at your missus one day and scaring the shit out of her because, particularly for you, like, you're a big, imposing bloke. If you just start turning around and telling her to fuck off and this, that, and the other,
it could be quite intimidating.
That's a mistake.
Or if I start smashing stuff,
ramming your cock down her throat till she chokes, and then telling her, "I just wanted to see your mascara run." That's not a mistake.
No.
You know, that's bringing a 16-year-old to your house and telling her,
"Look,
don't tell your
honest,
friends."
That's something we haven't touched on either. Like, And like that's another one of the reasons that made me think he was guilty. Because I was like, what 30-year-old man wants to date a 16-year-old?
Well, do you know
what I
what's
mean?
interesting? So have you seen the clip of him presenting an award to Bob Geldof?
And he called him a see you next Tuesday.
Yeah, and he
didn't
just went, "What, Russell Brand? What cunt?"
Yeah.
Do you know the reason why he did that at the time?
No.
He
He called him the wrong name on air,
No.
didn't he?
No. Well, I mean, he's probably done a great many
he
wrong.
kissed his granddaughter.
He was
hasn't
seen.
or his
He
daughter.
was supposedly dating. Yeah, the papers had him
Another
dating
16-year-old.
his 16-year-old daughter at the time.
Yeah.
And do you know what's quite worrying was around the same time. Do you know who Russell Brand helped introduce around that same period when he was dating that woman, girl? He was also introduced Noel Fielding to a 16-year-old, and they began dating.
Yeah.
This is something I want to touch on as well while we're drifting into the 15-year-old Alice, as she's been named in the
which isn't her real name. It's been changed for
her real name. Oh, I wish we had a bleep button. I wish we had a bleep so I could just say her real name. Alice, as she's known anyway, 15-year-olds. There's a lot of discussion at the moment about obviously the legal age of sex being the legal age of consent in the UK being 16 years old.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have pointed out quite rightfully, because a lot of Russell Brand's defenders have said, like, well, she was legal, she knew what she's even come out and said the reason that the legal age of consent is 16, and obviously there's no way to really police this or nail this down with law, but the reason it's 16 is because it's deemed that's the age that teenagers are in a position to be discovering sex with each other.
Yeah.
Not
with much older people.
Not that a 40-year-old bloke or a 30-year-old bloke at the time, as he was, can decide that's the youngest legal age he can have sex with someone. There's a big difference between the two things. And it's also, I find it very interesting that all this discourse about, from the same people who, and not to get too political, but the same, because obviously there's discussion about lowering the age of voting at the moment. And a lot of the people who are saying they're just kids, they don't know what they're, you can't let a 16-year-old vote. Yeah. There's a lot of crossover between those people saying 16-year-olds can't vote, they don't know what they're doing. Now also saying, well, she was old enough to know what she was doing and she was old enough to consent to it and blah, blah, blah. But she said she was groomed. Yeah. She had no idea.
Yeah, she said looking back on it, she feels she was groomed.
She was young, she was impressionable, she met a famous person.
And his behaviour was very controlling and coercive and...
Very.
Yeah.
Very worrying.
Yeah.
So even though a lot of the stuff... There's only one incident that she's reported as being non-consensual.
Yeah.
But it's still... He's never going to be done legally on it.
No.
But ethically, it's incredibly worrying.
Yeah, like I said, his own behaviour...
And the taxi driver, I mean, shout out to the taxi driver.
Yeah, the taxi driver that said, don't go in there.
Please, if it was my daughter, I'd want someone.
Yeah.
Well,
do you know what? Speaking of people that should have done something.
The parent?
Look.
Because
to be honest
I'm
with
with
you,
them on
of
this.
course I've had, to be honest with you, I've had the discussion before the pod. If I had a 16-year-old daughter and she came home with a 30-year-old celebrity, it wouldn't be happening. Do you know what I mean?
But equally, I appreciate where her parents coming from.
But that is not me saying
they want to let her.
They are responsible. I'm just saying what I would do.
But her mum, obviously, for people who haven't seen the dispatches or haven't read the article, her mum went to confront Brand to say, look, she's an adult, and in our eyes, she's an adult and she can do what she wants. But this is really
weird,
wrong because. You know, she's very she is still young enough to be impressionable, and you are taking advantage of her.
The girl herself has said
he had big bravado and he kissed her.
It's not on her parents. She made, at the time, made a decision, and they didn't really have any other recourse. I'm just, like I said, I'm not saying that I think they're responsible, because they're not, but I just think I would have dealt with that differently.
And this is the problem as well, because this isn't just some bloke down the street.
No, it's someone in a position of power.
This is someone at the height of their fame and power who's surrounded themselves with a good legal team and has become.
Do you know what I also found really uncomfortable about the documentary, and it's less obvious in the article, but they talked to a few of the people that worked with him, and they're quoted in the article, but it's a bit different seeing them on. And they were all talking about how appalled they were at his womanising behaviour, because I would say about the second half of the documentary was all about that sort of behaviour, including the sack stuff, the Savile interview. But with the behaviour working for Big Brother, because apparently routinely he would get runners or whoever, producers, whoever was working on the show to go get numbers from women.
Yeah.
And basically use them as his recruiting agents.
Basically like pimps.
Yeah. And all of them are saying how appalled they were, how uncomfortable it made them. But they kept fucking doing it.
Well, there was one woman in particular who I remember reading in the article who said that she felt so conflicted and she's carried that guilt for a long time. She said the thing is, and she sort of says in the article, like, I'm not excusing, I don't want to seem like I'm making an excuse, she says, but I'd worked so hard to get my foot in the door. She says it was still a male industry, and she said I'd worked so hard to get my foot in the door, and I was terrified that I'd be blacklisted if I stepped up and did anything.
And I completely empathise with
and
all
I'm
of
not
that.
excusing her, but I get it.
I get it, but we've talked about in the past, like with the Schofield situation, if we'd have been working around Schofield with what was going on and stuff like that, we would have said something. We would have, and we talked about with Savile in the past, the amount of people that turned a blind eye or enabled it by doing nothing. We have to expect people to do better because there's very few ways in reality other than really policing it and changing laws and getting far more real with it. The most realistic way we change this shit is by calling people out and risking our own issues from it. And I know that's far easier said than done, and I wasn't in their situation. I don't know how they felt. I wasn't in their shoes. But I think we have to expect better of ourselves.
No, and it'd be interesting to see what we'd do if we actually were in the shoes.
Yeah.
But even at a kind of grassroots level, even at a kind of base level, if you see your friend say something, make a joke. I mean, it's hard. I appreciate it's a bit difficult because we do make a lot of jokes on this podcast. I feel comfortable making those jokes with you because I know you very well, and I know that
it's all about
as much
intent,
as I've always told you and told the viewers, the listeners, the viewers, that you are a misogynist. I know full well that there is not a misogynistic.
No, there isn't. Like,
I know that.
Am I ignorant at times? Yes. Do I say stupid shit sometimes? Yes. But my intent is never one to offend. Like, I try and because the big issue we have today, and this going way outside of this for a second, is how divisive everything is. And the only way we ever find a path forward is through the middle. So I try to as much as possible now, and I lean more to the left.
I can see where you're going with this.
I try and be more in the sense. So it's like, why with this situation, if, like I said, if he's guilty of this shit, fucking lock the guy up. He should never be allowed to make millions again. The guy's a scumbag. But if he's not, I'm also not comfortable with some of the stuff that's happened, like being demonetized on YouTube and all this, because in a court of law, he's not been found guilty, but he is, like, he's lost his literary agent, he's lost his actual agent, his publicist.
Yeah, but he's
been demonetized on YouTube.
That's the consequences of a free market. That's the consequences of capitalism, of companies choosing to align themselves with who they want to align themselves.
Because of public
YouTube,
demand.
For example, are under no obligation to let
but they're
anyone.
being inconsistent though. Because
and
when Marilyn Manson was accused of
inconsistencies.
being a sexual abuser by his ex-partner, they released a public statement saying that until he was found guilty of anything,
and
there was
absolutely
more
attack
evidence.
the inconsistencies, but
So and like, I'll put my nails on this. I don't think this is a big conspiracy because of Russell Brand's views. And I had this conversation with my sister because I was like, if they wanted to go after him, they could just go after his views. He's seen as alt enough that they could discredit him from the stuff he comes out with anyway. So they don't need to make up some big conspiracy to come after him.
So first of all, I like that you're consistent through your life. You're talking about finding space through the middle. That's the only way forward. And I think that dates back to your days of El Matador. just straight through the middle. Yeah. You've always wanted it. That's where the action should be.
It's where my zone of terror
straight
is,
through
bro.
the middle. But also, I think there was an interesting thing about. I saw a tweet, I think it was, that named all these people that are like alternative people that have had sexual assault allegations thrown at them. And I was like, the problem with that is, and they were like, do you see the pattern? Do you see the pattern? Like, the problem with that is half of that list have actually had their success after the allegations were thrown at them. Like, accusations of rape and assault, and I know we've spoken about it on the forum, and you know, we've been divided on the topic to a certain extent in terms of what happens to afterwards.
Yeah.
But it's not the smear campaign that they think it is, because there are plenty of very successful men who have ridden rape accusations and not only come out of it fine, but then gone on to bigger things.
Yeah.
So it won't bring him down.
I think it depends. I mean, look, if he's found guilty, of course it will. But
The fact is, his core audience now are not going to jump ship over the rape allegations.
I don't think
because
he's
they
going to
see
do
it
a lot.
as,
I don't see him continuing to release content whilst all of this goes on.
No, but in the aftermath, his core viewership is still going to be there.
I think it would depend on what happened to him. I think if he went up, look, I think there will always be extreme people. Like we've seen it with Donald Trump, that no matter what you throw at him, it just makes the people love him more that support him. So there's probably going to be that element of Russell, but I don't think he'll be anywhere near as popular if he was found guilty, if he then started doing content again.
No, probably not, but I do think the core...
He'd never be seen in a film again, would he? He wouldn't be in a TV series.
Hasn't been seen in a film for years anyway.
I think he was in, the last one he was in, is it No? What's the one that Justin Timberlake did, the Pixar thing? Is it Trolls? I think they did a second one, that was the last thing he was in.
That was a few years ago
It
now.
was 2 years ago. So yeah, like he's not in, but he would have us believe that's...
There's another, in the kind of wake of it all as well, are you aware of the London Hughes revelation, if you will, her story?
London Hughes.
She's a comedian, so she's a British comedian, a London comedian, conveniently enough.
Is that her actual name, London?
Yes, that is
Fair
her name.
enough.
And she's ended up going on and having actually quite a lot of success in America. So there's a reason you haven't really seen a lot of her, whatever, because she did a little bit here. She did I think she did like a live at the Apollo.
Yeah.
Couple of little TV appearances, and then she just decided to focus her career in America because it was taking off and it was doing well. Why wouldn't you? It's a bigger place, there's a bigger audience. There's 70
you can crack it there,
70 million people here, there's 400 million people there. You're in immediately a bigger order, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, she turned on she because when she first signed with a major agent, it was the same agent as Russell Brand, who have now, like you said, have dropped him. But she first signed with them. And she said she remembers being quite shocked that one of the first things they said in one of their first meetings was, "Don't sleep with Russell Brand."
Yeah.
And she was like, "I'm sorry, is that a problem you face?" And they said to her, "Russell likes to pursue women," and this is the language they were using. He said he likes to pursue women. He likes to get them, if you will, bed them. And then he gets bored with them, and he doesn't want to see him again. So he said, it's not that just he leaves them alone. He's like, he wants them gone. No, so he will tell the agency, and the agent. This is obviously all hearsay, but the agent, according to London Hughes, told her that we've had to get rid of people that we were representing in the past.
Yeah. Because
Russell had pursued them, slept with them, and then didn't want to see them again. So he told us, we have to get rid of him. And unfortunately, the agent was like, "I'm just an agent. I don't handle any of this."
Yeah.
He said, "But he's one of the company's biggest earners."
Yeah.
And we've had to get rid of talent before.
To be honest with you, and we've sort of talked about this before as well, one of my biggest issues of all of this is the real dishonesty in the aftermath of these things of companies, agencies, and all these people. Like, just in the thing of, like, dropping him, because if it was this big open secret who he is, how he behaves, and how he treats women, they were all fine with it up until this moment.
Well, apparently, according to the article, the Times article, his agency initially, when they wrote to them and said, "Can you respond to these allegations?"
Yeah.
They said, "They're ludicrous. Russell's an upstanding person. He's absolutely good as gold kind of thing. He's always been fine with us, and there's no problems." And then a couple of days later, just before the article was published,
they removed all sign of him, didn't they?
They responded again and said, and this is what makes me laugh. It's like, why release a statement and then look into it? Why don't you look into it, then release the statement? But that's not how the entertainment industry works.
Yeah.
So they released the statement saying, "Nope, he's fine. He's going nowhere." And then they released a statement a couple of days later, before the article actually came out, that said, "Actually, we've investigated what you've shown us, and we have discovered through our own records and our own archives that actually there was some behaviour that doesn't represent us, and we're cutting ties with him.
I don't believe a word of it.
Well,
I've-
what do you think would make them change their minds?
Public outcry. I think as soon as something becomes toxic and it's quite clear this situation is toxic, these companies just go, all right, dump him.
So do you think that when they first contacted them and said, we're releasing this article about your client,
Yeah,
here's what we're releasing, the bulk of it. You think they thought this might just blow over?
Well, I think if what we've heard to be believed, that every time one of these things pops up, Russell gets an injunction and gets it silenced, they probably just thought that was going to happen again. And the second they found, oh, fuck, this thing's going out tomorrow.
That's a good point. Maybe they just thought he was going to get another injunction.
It's dropping like a hot shit. Like, to be honest with you, even what I found really disorientating watching the documentary, right, was they kept referring to Channel 4 like it was this other thing, like it wasn't the company that's paid for this documentary to be made. And, like, I just found that really weird. And then to release this documentary and then Channel 4 to come out and say, well, we're now going to look into this and see.
Well, I don't think Channel 4.
Anything.
I don't think Channel 4 made the documentary.
No, they paid for it.
I don't think they did pay for it. I think they picked it up. They would have paid them for the rights.
So they paid to
they paid to get it, but I don't think they paid to. Cause this thing was going on for like a year, 18 months.
I heard it was 4 years with the Times and Dispatches
even
working
longer
together.
So maybe they did. Then maybe they did. I take it back.
So that was what I found really weird. I was like, so why would you do all of this and then say you're going to look into it?
Can we appreciate, by the way, the work of some of these journalists in uncovering this stuff, and not just in these sexual abuse cases, but going back.
Look, journalism plays a very key part. We saw it with Harvey Weinstein. If it wasn't for journalists, that story wouldn't have broken. He'd still be abusing women in Hollywood. So
the church, the New York Post and the church.
Yeah, exactly. Was it New? No, it was.
Was it the
Spotlight?
Washington Post?
It was the Washington
Spotlight.
Post. It was Spotlight.
You're right. There's a whole film about it.
Yeah.
Called Spotlight.
Called Spotlight. Yeah. And so, like, obviously,
it was. I think it was the Washington
journalism
Post.
Is incredibly important.
I think it was the Washington Post that broke the Nixon story, the Watergate story.
Maybe.
But yeah, again.
Yeah. So look, journalism is important. And yeah, so.
I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate the hard work that goes into these things. And like I said,
they take a long time.
They wouldn't have been able to just talk to these people and then go, right, let's go and air it. They'd have had to make sure that they weren't about to get sued. Yeah. Because it's not just that. If you work for 4 years, if it was 4 years, you work for 4 years working on this thing and you're sloppy and careless, you don't make it airtight. And then just before it airs, just before the article's released, Russell comes along, his lawyers come along and go, there's enough there that we're just going to block it.
Because for me, what I'd like to think is, if you've commissioned or you've agreed that you're going to pick up this show when it's finished making, and you know what it's about sexual abuse by a high-profile individual that's worked for your organisation.
I would argue in that moment that whilst they're doing their investigation...
Yeah.
And you've paid for it, it's best for you not to do your own investigation until they've done theirs. Well, and then you launch yours.
Considering Dispatches were asking for information from Channel 4 itself, like any evidence of complaints made about him, which they're claiming there aren't any. I don't know. I'd just like to think you would. This is obviously going to be a big story. You'd want to have your ducks in a row for the day of release, wouldn't you? That's what I find odd about it.
And I do find it sort of a bit, I think a bit of what you're saying, not quite, I appreciate it's not quite the point you're making, but I think you may be on the same page as this. I do find it funny, for sure, that Channel 4 are kind of touting themselves as the heroes in this story, and they are to an extent.
He had most of his success
through Channel 4.
And most of his bad
career,
behaviour,
his public career was almost launched
from
Channel 4.
Yeah. So, and like even his agent dropping him was like, well, you've been with him since day dot, so you fucking know what he's been up to. Hypocrite. It just, like, if he's guilty of it, all these people are, for me, these organisations, the people that worked with him, they say, don't
they? There's bad things are only allowed to happen when good people do nothing.
There's actually a line in Spotlight where they were like, if it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to abuse a child.
Mm.
Like, there's blame to go around. And like, I think with this, like, I see this as a potential opportunity or a boiling pot moment, because like we keep having this over and over again. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's Schofield, whether it's Greenwood, Brand, it keeps coming out that these people in high positions of powers, where they're well paid, they're protected, they're looked after because they're worth something to whatever organisation they represent, are allowed to just. And the really weird, like with the Brand thing, they were showing that basically because they didn't have enough evidence to get rid of him at whatever point he was causing problems, they just promoted him and gave him more money and put him in a different position.
Yeah, you don't have to get rid of someone, but equally you don't have to put them front and centre and make them the poster child for your brand.
Leave. Pay him, but don't put him on camera.
Well, make him a report, or a field report for some 2-bit program.
Other ways to deal with it.
That's going out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Promotion.
Stick him in Dictionary Corner every day of the week. Like, do you know what I mean? There's no.
Yeah, but I feel like in that situation, like we know he's a scumbag, but we don't really have proof.
Can't stick him in the corner next to Susie Dent. No,
that would be problematic.
That's dangerous for her.
With any female.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, look, I don't know whether he's guilty or not. I lean towards guilty.
I think I don't think these people would be able to release what they were unless there was enough truth in it
the case.
That they were safe.
Do I have faith
being sued
in any of the organisations involved to have acted completely above board at all points? If I'm being honest, no, I don't.
Very quickly because
the one example, and I had this thought, and like I said, I'm not actually trying to defend Russell Brand. I'm just trying to play it down the middle, I guess. But
El Matador.
If you were to ask Cliff Richard, does he have full faith in journalism and journalistic organisations to get these things right? He would say no. And I would say even though we know he hasn't done anything, people would still say,
he's a good example where people will possibly send him and go, look, he was falsely accused kind of thing. But it's like, yeah, but most of the others that get accused, it turns out they did do it. They did do it.
But that is an example that it can go wrong.
But, like I said, I think they've done enough due diligence.
I hope that's the case.
Very quickly, before we wrap it up, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on all the people defending him. Do you think that automatically makes him right? No, let me rephrase that. That's not what I'm saying. Do you think that automatically makes them questionable as people? Or I know some of them are probably naive, but for some of them coming out and saying some of the things
I think it depends on what stance they're taking. If it's a case of, well, I don't trust women, then no, I think that does say a lot about them as people. If it's in a case of, and I've heard people make the argument of, well, he's not, like, we have a presumption of innocence until proven guilty, then I think that's a legitimate argument to make.
But a lot of
agree with it or not.
I'm talking about a lot of the ones that are coming out, and you're saying exactly what we were saying earlier, going
that he's being silenced.
Saying it's just too convenient. Why come forward now? Why not go to the police? And also, we don't know that they didn't. Like, some of these women did go to the police. And the police have told them basically what a lot of women have been told over the years.
Yeah.
Look, and let's be honest, they don't say I'm really sorry, but I'm really sorry. This isn't going to go anywhere.
I think the only solution to those sort of people, and we're talking about like the real fringe people that are like, this is just a big conspiracy and it's all been manifested to stop him speaking truth to power. The only way to combat that is to just be out in the open about what we have, what the actual truth is. This is what we've got. This is why we think he's guilty.
I'll tell you what made me think I would automatically assume, and I'm not going to say definitely, but assume you're probably an abuser. The ones who say, very specifically the ones who say, if look what's happening if they're calling out Brand, it could happen to any of us. And it's like, no, I think you've probably done something that you know.
Again, I would probably you'll get a very specific example, but I could understand, like, because I've made the argument in the past that, like, for example, with Johnny Depp, right, he had the means to fight the accusations that were against him, just like Russell Brand does. But someone like me or you, if we were accused of that and we know we're innocent, we don't necessarily have the means.
But very, we've sort of touched on it. Very, very few men actually get falsely accused of. It happens,
yeah.
But very, very few get falsely accused. In my opinion, the kind of people that and obviously I appreciate I'm making a certain leap at each stage here, but I think
some of them could be abusers. Yeah,
I think a lot of, not all of them, but I think a lot of people that say well, it could happen to me.
Yeah.
I think there's something in the back of their minds. They've done something that they're thinking,
I
could
would
that,
get in trouble for
but
that.
they go, yeah, could that be sexual assault? And I'm going to tell you now, if you're thinking, could it be?
It probably is.
It probably is. And therefore, whatever your
But if that's what
intentions were, you were a
If
sexual.
that's what their motivation is,
you've done
behind
sex.
it,
You've
then
committed
fair
sexual
enough.
assault, and you're the only reason you're saying, well, it could happen to any of us. Well, that's because you did it, and therefore, yes, it could happen to you, but
Yeah.
it would be a fair accusation. That's my opinion. Like I said, I'm sure there are some that aren't like that. I think most people that are saying it could happen to any of us.
Yeah.
It could happen to me. It could happen to me. Well, what about when I did, and often they'll say things like that. They'll go, well, I do things all the time that could be taken that way. And it's like, right, well, stop doing them. Let's start there.
Stop snapping women's asses.
Yeah, I do loads of stuff. I do that kind of stuff with the women at work all the time. It's like, right, okay.
Well, you shouldn't.
Are you not seeing that the problem is what you're doing, not that they're calling it out?
Well, yeah, look, in that specific circumstance, I don't feel particularly obliged to defend these people. So if you want to generalise that they are potentially abusers themselves, then they could potentially be.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Should we, even as sombre as it is, should we amble our way somberly into the socials?
Yeah, I
Into
think
the
this has
plug
gone
of the
all right.
socials.
Have I come, like, my biggest worry going into this?
Oh,
right?
misogynist, hugely. You can't hide it. It oozes out of you. And I think we've done really well, by the way, to not joke too much on this issue.
No,
We've
I've
not really thrown
No.
any.
And I think we've had a very fair discussion. I don't think we've been, I don't know, over the top. We've not had a go at one another.
I
Do you know
don't
what
think
I
we've
mean?
been polarised in this discussion.
No,
There's elements where I've been polarised. I appreciate that there are elements where I'm at one end of the spectrum and
Yeah.
I'm not moving to the middle. But for the most part, I think it was a very...
yeah. My main worry with the polarising aspect is there will obviously be some people you can't reach. There will be some people that are just dead set in what their beliefs are. But there are just some people out there that are either ignorant or uneducated in something, or they haven't seen the right stuff and maybe their feed feeds them because of what they're into.
And I find the best way to reach those people is to say, you ignorant, uneducated fool.
Stop touching up women.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. That's like so often it's we need to and like look to kind of go off the Daniel Sloss thing. We need to do it now. We're very lucky that
No, look, I agree with you.
in our lives. I can't think of anyone that we have regularly or semi-regularly that has ever given any indication of being that way.
No,
Because I think
I think we knew one creepy guy, but he never actually did anything.
Well, I think we've and perhaps we should have done more to directly challenge him, but we've phased people out. People who've come in with misogynistic behaviour, like, we make jokes.
We were never a group that accepted big dick energy.
Or
Do you know what I mean? Anyone that came in and tried to throw their
equally
weight
any kind of
around
bigotry or racism.
Yeah, we've never really.
We phased those people out.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, there tends to be a lot of crossover between the views that are like that
Yeah.
are bigoted and misogynistic and homophobic, and
yeah.
there tends to be a lot of crossover. But
Yeah.
we've kind of phased them out. But we do need to, when you do see it,
You need to call it out 100%. And like,
stop it
if
early.
people are guilty of these crimes, throw the book at them. Yeah, there's a lot of shitbags out there, man. And like we're finding, more, like I said, this just keeps happening. And I think we need to change something. And I think the main place that starts is on a societal level, on an individual basis of just holding each other to better standards.
I think you might, and this might sound daft, and it might sound silly, and it might sound preachy and reachy, but I promise you it's not. I think that when you might see moments where you're just having a laugh with a friend, and they say things that are a bit, maybe you think, oh, that's a bit too far, but we're all just having a laugh, we're all just having a joke.
Yeah,
If you step in and challenge it enough, you might actually save them doing something. You might save someone being subjected to actual assault.
yeah.
Now, whether that's verbal harassment, physical harassment, penetrative harassment, you might actually save someone by challenging out that banterful behaviour.
I've just had an example come into my head of when we were younger.
No, because I didn't act on that, and the courts, that never stuck.
No, but we went somewhere once and someone we knew went to hit a woman And I remember warning them afterwards. Like, I heard them out, I listened to their sob story, why they were angry and all of that. And at the end of it, I was just like, look, if I ever hear again
I
that
remember.
you've even threatened a woman again, you're going to have to answer to me.
I was very drunk that night.
I genuinely deplore violence against women. I think it's one of the lowest.
It's exactly what a misogynist would say.
Like, second, probably to children. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think children hit many women.
No, but you know what I mean?
Children are the worst for it.
Children are the worst for it. They're violent little bastards.
Sorry, I'm crushing your important point.
But yeah, I deplore violence against women, and I agree with you. I think we need to do more on an individual basis to call each other out.
But that's the thing, if someone does something once and gets away with it,
they're more likely to do it again.
And take it to the next level.
And like, that person, I'm not even saying what I did is the reason they've never done it again, but they haven't, to my knowledge, ever done it again.
Because I think as well, what helped, as daft as it sounds, is the threat that they would, the knowledge that their friends disapproved so much that if they found out, they would lose all their friends.
Yeah.
And they would have no social life.
No.
And I'm not saying that stopped them. I think that person probably was just in a really weak moment. Yeah, I'm not defending it at all.
Look, we need to be able to, when we discuss these things,
we made it clear that that's not an option
rather than the excuse. So when we discussed, and I was talking to Andrew off pod, and I've told you about it as well. Another guy I used to go to school with has turned out to be a paedophile rapist, and we were talking about.
And your school was knocking him out.
And he was the victim of abuse himself, this person. So he is a victim and an abuser. He's two. So like, both of those fit. Like, perhaps if we'd have dealt with him better at the time when it happened to him, he might just be a scumbag. But we might have been able to prevent it at the same time. And that doesn't excuse what he did, that he's also a victim. But we need to understand and be able to explain what's wrong with people and look for a solution. And the only way we do that is by having open and honest conversations.
And I would say this as my final point. I know for myself, that the idea of calling someone out, and I have this reputation of being woke, lefty, hippie, snowflake. Snowflake's usually the one that gets leveled at me. I get that reputation I have, and no one wants to be called. When you're just having a bit of banter and you step in, you go, "Nah, that's too much." No one, you don't want to do it because you don't want to be that guy that's turned around and it's like, oh, and you think, oh, they won't invite me out because they think I'm not allowed, whatever. But for all those fears, for all those awkward discussions, think about it this way: if you actually stop someone being a victim of assault, isn't it worth it just to be that guy for 2 minutes, to be 30 seconds of a buzzkill, to get a reputation of being a snowflake or a wokey or a lefty or whatever?
Really isn't that worth it? You want to be?
God, I'm so sorry. I looked at a camera at a really awkward moment then that made it look like I was doing some kind of like speech. Like, guys, come on.
Like, I think, fuck, you made me lose my train of thought.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's gone.
I was saying, like, I think it's worth that bit of moment of awkwardness.
Yeah, thank you. You just brought me back into it. You don't want to be however long down the line and find out someone you knew has done something terrible and that perhaps you could have done something earlier on. It's the worst position anyone want, like, to know that you have some level of responsibility.
Second worst, I would argue the victim is the worst. Second worst.
No, that's very fair. That's very fair.
But see, these little jokes are coming late at the end when we're wrapping up.
We've dealt with the
meat of the situation.
The meat of the situation. But yeah, I still think we're very, very early in all of it. I'm interested to see what he does next and whether he defends it, like how he defends it, and like we didn't really actually talk about the video that he released.
Oh, his badly cut video.
And like there was a moment, and like to be honest with you, there's moments throughout all of it where I've been like, oh, Russell, like, and in that video, I was sat there and like everyone keeps saying, what's with all the fucking hand gestures?
Oh, have you seen there's a video, and I appreciate it's maybe a bit sensitive, but someone's done one of those, someone off camera giving him directions, thing. They're like, okay, Russell, why don't you start off like you're a mime in a box? Brilliant. Okay, now just make sure you say it's consensual.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Don't worry, we'll cut just before you say it. And like it's a really well put together video.
Yeah. But it was when, and I said it to you off pod, when he started comparing himself to Joe Rogan, that they were trying to take me down like they did Joe Rogan. I was like, well, look, you can say what you like about Joe Rogan.
And I do. On this pod, I have.
But I have never heard a whiff of any impropriety on his behalf.
And I said that to you, didn't I? I was like,
you
look,
were like,
I'm the first to attack Joe Rogan.
But I've never heard.
And I regularly do on this podcast. But I've never heard any hint of him being either an abuser, or
all I've ever heard is actually how,
or even being complicit in abuse. I'm not. There's
all
never
I've
been
ever
a hint
heard
of
is how like basically sound he is if you meet him in person.
I've never met a whiff of it, and that's the other thing as well. All these women coming out and saying, like, oh well, I met Russell Brand, and he didn't rape me, and it's like, okay, like just to be clear, rapists don't necessarily rape every person they meet. So just because they didn't rape you
doesn't mean
they weren't a rapist.
No, right.
I just want to get that very firmly out in the ether.
Yeah.
But we didn't do the socials.
We didn't do
the socials.
Right, so let us know what you thought, guys. I mean, there's not really a side on this. We haven't really pitched it at that.
As I said in the intro to last week's episode, what are you going to do? Come out and support rape?
Well, exactly. So yeah, let us know what you think.
Let us know if you support rape.
Let us know who you agreed with more, because we did differ on things, and we've,
like I said,
we've got a different starting point from what we think on it. I think we agree on outcome, what we think of people who perpetrate these things. We just disagree on whether it's a dead certainty, whether he's guilty or not, which I don't think is really that divisive, and I think we've handled it quite well. Let us know if that is the case, and you can do that, and it'll be on screen here beautifully at Twitter or X, depending on what you prefer, at Swords Crossing. On Facebook, it's just Crossing Swords, or just check out Tara Strong's Facebook page. She likes tweeting us. She's Facebooking us. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at CrossingSwords_podcast.
Great content there.
Absolutely. And we're popping right now on
You're
TikTok.
part of a big family.
Absolutely. And you can also email us at crossingswords19@gmail.com. Please do so. We feel quite lonely. We open them up.
And we want episode ideas.
Yeah.
What should we talk about? I knew it would feel weird trying to plug ourselves after that, such a somber thing.
It absolutely is. And it was something I was going to surprise us with in the pod, but I decided not to. I was like, this isn't the episode for jolly surprises and clips and shit. But yeah, also, thank you to the people who've started liking videos. More of you have started doing it. But we need more of you to do it. It makes a world of difference to us. It helps with algorithms. It helps with more people seeing us and our reach growing and the pod improving. We'd like one day to not be in my mother's living room at the dining table. You know, we're enjoying it. Don't get me wrong. We're grateful.
You want to see us one day acting like mimes, defending baseless allegations, although let's be fair, they wouldn't be baseless, and they're not baseless with Russell Brand. Then you need to like those. You need to pump those numbers up.
You're a cheeky,
and that's
boy,
on
Jay.
You. You think that was insensitive? You think that might have crossed the line?
Cheeky boy. See you soon, guys.
Bye.
And at all hopes, stay free.